This is KUTV 2 News This Morning.
The snow has started falling across the Wasatch Front. That's impacting traffic. We'll tell you where coming up. The fire started in the carport on this side, but it was on this side where residents were inside. Tonight, we're not only hearing his family story, but also a warning of what you might not know about your dentist. Thank you so much for speaking with us this morning. Muchas gracias por hablar con nosotros. So under the new rules, a student could be practicing football at one school during the beginning of the week, then transfer schools, and by the time the big weekend game rolls around, they could be playing for the opposing team. Yeah, hey guys, we are here in the 2 News Chevy Mobile Weather Lab, and we are out on the roads. We've just gotten an update from the power crews. They say everything is back to normal and restored here. I could feel the pressure of the G-force come down on my body. We will work to get more details, and we'll see you back here at 7:30. Amy, back to you. Because before you start packing up your things to move into a tiny house, you're going to need one of these, a certificate of occupancy, which might be tough to get for your tiny house. There's quite a difference between what prosecutors and defense attorneys view in terms of the sentencing.
To report to you that the situation is under control.
Anxious parents waited on every word that came over the intercom outside Mountain View High School. You could sense their agonizing worry about their kids inside.
So when we heard what had happened, we immediately thought of all the what ifs.
Those what ifs went through their minds until they were allowed inside to get their kids.
It was just good to see him and to see that he was okay.
Relief was obvious as parents hugged their kids. Some of the students recounting the shock of what happened this morning.
That someone was stabbing like 5 other kids, but he was already arrested.
And someone just told me to get in someplace safe.
We tried to call our son right after that because he's in the school.
As students poured out, this couple's fear grew. They've been unable to reach their son.
Our little guy's been in, had some challenges, with friend struggles right now. So we're thinking it's, got something to do with him. So, scared.
They eventually made it inside to speak with school administrators. The announcements continued as parents picked up their kids, who all left with questions about why a fellow student would stab 5 others. As the victims are now in the hospital, the job for these students is to show support for each other.
He could come home, but he said, I just want to be here for my friends.
The situation at Mountain View High School has been resolved.
You've probably heard the craze about the tiny house movement. Many Utahns are buying tiny houses that are just a few hundred square feet.
They're called efficient, they're called low cost, even cute, but there's a catch to these tiny houses. Our Jeremy Harris investigated and found you might have a hard time finding a spot for your tiny home if you're thinking about trying to downsize.
Here it is, in all its tiny glory. A stove, a bathroom, a bed, a home.
Spell.
Spell?
Our names.
Oh, spell that, you said.
Meet the O'Reillys, Leonard and Sydney, spelled without the Y. They are checking out this tiny home for one very important reason.
We are actually homeless.
Long story short, Leonard retired, they wanted to downsize, put their house on the market, and it sold super fast.
We've gotten rid of 80% of all of our goods.
And that's why this tiny house has a huge appeal for the O'Reillys.
The less stuff you have, the more freedom you have.
They, like most of the tiny house community, want to live simply.
Would you rather be involved with things, or would you rather be involved with people? And our decision was we'd rather be involved with people.
And they're in the right place. Utah is perhaps a hotspot for the tiny home movement.
It's a full home, it's just less, it's just smaller.
Meet Boyd Ridey. He stumbled upon tiny houses and in a few years has built his company, Alpine Tiny Homes, into one of the premier tiny home manufacturers in the country.
Everything from there just kind of exploded. People started calling and the demand was far greater than I had ever imagined.
If one of these houses looks attractive to you, well, join the list.
Keeping up with the demand is the biggest challenge.
His company pumps out on average 2 to 3 a month. But as things stand right now, the tiny homes leaving his shop are not welcome everywhere.
And there's a few places, not many in Utah.
Because before you start packing up your things to move into a tiny house, you're going to need one of these, a certificate of occupancy, which might be tough to get for your tiny house.
They tend to be kind of on the fringe of the local zoning laws.
Morgan Brim is the Community Development Director in Vineyard, a small Utah County town that is exploring regulations for tiny homeowners.
When you deal with tiny homes, there's a lot of gray area, and that's kind of the frustration with the tiny home community.
Because here's the catch. See that tiny house mounted on wheels, kind of like a mobile home, which some cities won't allow you to live in full time, at least not without permits. Take it off the wheels and you got to meet all the city codes, which could include minimum square footage, permanent utility hookups, and, you guessed it, a permit. Those permits may be easier to come by in rural counties like Summit, Wasatch, and Garfield, but cities along the Wasatch Front are now recognizing the demand for tiny homes in their areas and looking at how they could possibly incorporate them in their communities.
We're not in favor of it, we're not against it, we're simply just doing research on it.
And as for the O'Reillys, they've picked out their tiny home in Panguitch and are now waiting to figure out the process for permits, which could be a hang-up, but they say they are ready to live with less.
There's a phrase that's used amongst tiny home people, less is more. And that's what we're looking for, having more time for ourselves. I get emotional about that. More time for ourselves.
Tiny home builders say an important first step is to check with the city about where you want to put the tiny home and then see what the requirements are. We have links to resources if you want to learn more about tiny homes on our website, KUTV.com.
This is a developing story from 2 News.
Welcome back. We are learning more about a wind-whipped fire that burned more than a dozen homes in Tooele overnight.
We now know that someone started the fire on purpose, and we are meeting some of the devastated families today as well.
We have live team coverage this afternoon, starting with Jeremy Harris in Tooele with the latest on the fire. Jeremy?
And Ron and Mary, we are right now on Van Dyken Street, and as you can see behind me, the devastation here is difficult to take in. The fire officials describing it as catastrophic. You can see down the street they have brought in some backhoes to start the cleanup effort here on some of these homes that have just been completely leveled in the fire. We are told right now 10 homes have been destroyed completely, another 8 that have been significantly damaged. And as we kind of come down the street here, you can see just house by house how much damage there was. Now to my right, there is another home, and you can see it kind of up close what this fire did to these homes. There's some burnt out furniture, the burnt out framing of the home. Remember, somebody lived here last night, perhaps went to bed not thinking that anything like this would happen to their home, but that all changed in just a matter of seconds. This dramatic cell phone video caught the moments as firefighters raced to save homes near a raging field fire. High winds fanned the flames, pushing them north towards homes in a nearby neighborhood. One of those homes belonged to Javier Cortez.
When I ran out, I saw the flames were all around.
He and his wife grabbed their 4 children and ran out, barely escaping the fire that leveled the home they had lived in for just a few months.
We are distraught, but we have so much faith in the community, we are very united.
18 homes in total were burned, 10 a complete loss, and others with significant damage.
You could see the color and the smoke, and you could tell that it was really high.
Neighbors described the chaotic scene as they tried to warn others of the fire.
I ran up the street and just eating a hole through one of my neighbor's homes.
There you go, bro, go! Go, I'll grab the one in the backyard.
It's really hard to see how some of these people were affected. Our close neighbors, lost everything.
Nearly every structure on Van Dyke Way was leveled. Piles of rubble are all that remain as emergency crews and neighbors try and figure out what will come next for their devastated community.
We'll be okay, but these people won't be. They lost everything in a matter of moments.
Thank you, God, thank you guys.
And here live again, some homeowners taking a look at their damage. As you see this car right now, you can see just how hot this fire was burning and what it did to this car, pretty much beyond recognition, melting anything that was not metal. Now, as for how this fire started, that really is the key question now for investigators. Again, we know that they believe that this was arson, that this was all intentionally set, but what leads them to believe that, or if they have any suspects right now, investigators are being fairly tight-lipped, not wanting to perhaps tip their hand to a possible suspect. Right now we're told that police officials are meeting with fire officials, kind of coordinating their effort in terms of how the investigation will proceed from here. But obviously you can imagine that only adds to the difficulty here for these homeowners who are already dealing with a devastating loss, to now know that it was perhaps intentionally set. It's important to note this is not in some remote part of the city. This is right in the middle of town. It just happened to be a field that was just next to this neighborhood, and it just went up just like that very quickly and leaving little time for these people to get out. But still, obviously, a lot to go from here. We will remain on the scene this afternoon and be providing updates, working with investigators to find out more about it if they have any information on a possible suspect here.
When you go to the dentist's office, you likely don't expect your life to be put in danger.
Yeah, but one Utah family says they know all too well the shock of when a seemingly routine dental procedure has some fatal consequences.
Jeremy Harris investigated how cases of deadly dental procedures are handled here in Utah.
It was in June 2014. A 22-year-old college student went under sedation at a dental clinic in Provo and never woke up. Tonight, we're not only hearing his family's story, but also a warning of what you might not know about your dentist.
So we had a typical brother relationship. I would tease him, he'd cry to mom.
Robert and Jared Wakefield were brothers, separated by only 4 years. Robert, a mentor and friend to 22-year-old Jared, who was in college and working as a manager at Domino's as he pursued his goal of becoming a youth therapist.
At the point where we were starting to get life figured out and knew the direction he wanted to go, and now it was a matter of getting there.
But Jared would never get there. A distressing call to Robert's phone changed everything.
Jared's had an accident. He's not well. It's a big deal. He's going to the hospital.
Robert didn't know what went wrong or how a trip to the dentist office ended with his brother now on the brink of death.
You've never even heard of something like this happening. For it to go from, hey, he's in a dental procedure to he's dead, it's like, no, that can't happen.
Jared had come here to the Smile Center Dental Clinic in Provo. Dr. Dennis Bloom was performing a tooth extraction with Jared under sedation. State investigative documents outline a timeline of what happened next. At some point around 4 p.m., Jared began coughing. A piece of gauze had apparently gone down his throat and he started choking.
911.
At 4:19 p.m., a 911 call went out requesting immediate help at the dentist's office. At 4:22, the paramedics arrived, and at 4:42, Jared was rushed into Utah Valley Hospital.
The likelihood of him being okay was like 1 in a million. He had gone 37 minutes from the time he stopped breathing to the time they got his heart going again.
The Wakefield family waited on edge for word from doctors, but 2 days later they directed medical staff to prepare Jared's organs for donation after he was declared brain dead.
It was just kind of an emptiness, you know?
But the shock of what happened was just beginning for Robert.
And I was like, well, how does that even happen, you know?
State investigators looked at the case and they called the dentist's actions grossly incompetent or grossly negligent. State charging documents outline a series of violations took place during the procedure before Jared died. For example, investigators said Dr. Bloom did not count how many pieces of gauze went in Jared's mouth, nor did he attach a string to the gauze that went in the back of the mouth, which could have been pulled out when Jared started choking.
I thought it was a freak thing when he died, and then to try to dig in and do some research and be like, oh my gosh, this is super common.
He found cases like his brother's in other states, but how common are cases like this in Utah? Well, it might be tough to tell.
Nobody's tracking it. Here in Utah, it's not tracked.
The State Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing regulates Utah dentists. Anytime there is injury or death during a procedure, dentists have 30 days to report it to DOPL. In a public records request, we asked state investigators at DOPL how many cases of injury or death during dental procedures they have dealt with in the last 6 years. In response, they told us they don't keep track, saying there are no statistics about death or injury. They pointed us to their website where you can type in the name of a dentist and check to see if they have had any disciplinary actions taken against them. Going through records for the last year, we found at least 5 dentists who've been disciplined by the state for a variety of reasons, but most for abusing prescription drugs. After Jared Wakefield's case, Dr. Bloom was given a $2,500 fine, banned from ever doing dental procedures involving general anesthesia, required to take a class on emergency medicine, and his license was publicly reprimanded. He remains a practicing dentist.
you assume they're all held to a certain level of care and you're safe wherever you go.
Robert says he forgives the dentist who oversaw his brother's procedure, but he says he is now a fierce advocate for accountability in dentistry and warns people to not assume their dentist has a spotless record.
If you're a parent and you've got a 3-year-old kid that needs to go to the dentist, and something like this had happened, you'd want to know about it.
Now, we spoke to Dr. Bloom's attorney, who told us Dr. Bloom's care was, quote, appropriate in all respects. There is a pending civil case for Jared's death. There is also a state case pending against the anesthesiologist who was assisting in Jared's procedure. We have links posted on our website where you can check with the state about your dentist.